An Olympic gold is priceless, but it does come at a cost. What do the host country, the athletes, and nations with little money have to pay for a chance of glory? This is Inside Story. Hello there, warm welcome to the programme with me, David Foster. Can anybody really say how much Olympic gold costs? Well, one Australian sports doctor reckons the price is as much as $40 million for each gold medal his country has won in the last 20 years. What happens if you don't have that kind of money? Can sport at the top level be fair when the difference between rich countries and poor ones is so massive? We'll talk about that a little bit later, but first let's take a closer look at the cost of winning gold. Well, money invested by the top Olympic countries can pay dividends. Before hosting the Games in 2008, China launched what was called Project 119 and invested millions in swimming, gymnastics and weightlifting, among other sports. It topped the table then and does so now. London golds for China have cost roughly $1.6 million each. Australia blames a slash in funding on its poor medal haul at London 2012. Way down the table with only one gold so far. It works out at $15 million for every gold medal. And individually, away from headline sports, personal funding is a problem. It can cost thousands of dollars for parents to support their children's Olympic dreams. In Africa, no surprise then that it's not in expensive glamour pursuits that their athletes succeed. Well, a level playing field it certainly is not. For more on this, let's introduce in London Wolfgang Maennig, gold medalist in rowing in the 1988 Olympics and author of a book on the economics of sport, and from Boston, Victor Matheson, another economist specialising in the economic impact of big events. Wolfgang, let me ask you this first of all. Your book, International Handbook of the Economics of Mega Sporting Events, includes contributions from Victor Matheson. Were you surprised as an Olympian, somebody who'd only seen it perhaps from one point of view, in a boat, with the training, were you surprised by what you found out?
Not really. So the volume, of course, covers a lot of subjects, and I'm not sure which subject you are just talking about, probably the economic effects of the Olympics. And there is a lot of evidence that a city or a country does not earn money from hosting the Olympic Games. But in a sense, for economists, it's not a wonder, because everyone here in London will agree that the Olympics are a good for London. And in economics, in the first lecture, what you get to know is that every good has a positive price. You have to pay for it.
Victor Matheson, when you looked into this and you heard everybody in London saying, yes, it's going to be fantastic for our city, it's going to be great for Britain overall, the Games will effectively pay for themselves. Did you think that they were deliberately fooling themselves, or do you think they really believed it?
Well, there's this great idea that there's always a triumph of hope over experience. And the experience of cities around the world that host these big events is almost every single one of these has ended up in a situation where it's been a big cost to the taxpayers that comes nowhere close to paying off in any sort of direct economic way. Mind you, London is putting on a fantastic Games for the athletes. It's fantastic for the spectators, but in the end, it's not going to be fantastic for the taxpayers.
Wolfgang, how different is it now? And I know you've been over in London watching the Games. You can compare now with 1988 when you won your medal, if you like. But how different is it for athletes from wealthy countries such as Germany, from Great Britain, from Australia, to those who come from the poorer nations? How different is the experience for them? How difficult is it for athletes who don't have very much money behind them?
Well, it depends on the sport. If you're interested in equestrian sport or in sailing, of course, athletes from poorer countries hardly have any chance to win a medal. But there are the runners from Ethiopia, the runners from Kenya, who really show that even with a few money, but good training conditions in your country, you can win medals. But in general, of course, it's true. A poorer country or nations with less money, with less resources, will have less chances to win a medal.
And in terms of your personal experience, your parents presumably had to put a lot of time and effort in. Did it cost them a lot of money to get you to the standard where you could possibly be an Olympic hopeful?
Yes, sure. My parents had to feed me, and I ate at least double the amount of food that my brother, for example, needed, because rowing is a calorie-consuming sport. And of course, I needed more money to be transported to the rowing club, etc. My parents invested, and my club, of course, also invested. They had to buy the boats, etc., to pay the coach.
And in terms of the amount of money that you took out of the Olympic Games, when we hear that some of the gold medal winners this time are going to become multi-millionaires, did it set you up for life, or are you just where you were? I mean, I know you're a very successful man, but did it help you financially?
No, not at all. Rowing is an amateur sport even today, and maybe some of the gold medal winners here will get an amount of money which makes them happy for a year of their life, but they cannot base their future lives on the money they earn here as a gold medal winner.
Victor Matheson, in Boston, there is such a big difference, isn't there, between somebody who wins a medal in a gold ribbon event we're talking about in the swimming pool, on the athletics track, and somebody perhaps who puts all their time and effort into a sport that they love, say fencing, and comes out of it out of pocket, really.
Yeah, sure. Think about it actually in two ways. First of all, sports are certainly a winner-takes-all sort of activity that you remember who wins the gold medal, say in rowing in '88 in Seoul, but you don't remember who came in second or third or fourth or fifth. And so that's one big deal. And also, of course, we understand dream teams and things like this. We see Usain Bolt in the premier event of with his spectacular run winning in the 100 meters. But in more obscure events, things like shot put, these athletes are pretty quickly forgotten. Lovely to have your moment in the spotlight, but that spotlight fades pretty quickly.
Well, let's take a look at two athletes who've done rather well at these games and their personal circumstances. That's Ryan Lochte, great American swimmer, and Gabby Douglas, the gymnast. Both of their families have said this week that they're in deep water financially. Now, presumably their offspring here will get some big endorsements, be able to sort of help them out for the rest of their lives. But for those people who don't do so well, it can be incredibly burdensome financially.
Well, yes, of course, training at this level requires an extremely high level of monetary commitment. You need the best facilities, the best equipment, the best of coaches, and these things don't come cheaply. And again, Gabby Douglas is certainly set. We're going to see her with tons of endorsements because, again, she's winning in one of these premier events. And, of course, she's just so likable from what we've seen on the TV of her. But again, if she had, instead of come in first, if she had come in 5th or 8th or 11th, those endorsements would not have been piling in nearly the same way. And the financial commitment certainly would be a huge burden for her family going forward.
Well, the cost of the Games, I'll be back with you both in just a moment. The cost of the Games is always a very sensitive issue. In London, it's going to apparently be almost 3 times as much as the initial estimates. The cost of the Games shot up from $4.5 billion to nearly $15 billion. Some people say it could be even higher than that. British leaders eager to suggest the Games generate significant income as well as what they call legacy value, but the critics say there's little evidence to support that claim. The reality probably somewhere in between. A report by Lloyds Banking Group says the Olympic Games in London will give the British economy a boost of $25.5 billion by 2017. But the UK is likely to see a negative economic impact in the short term because of the amount of money spent up front for infrastructure and security. That's a little bit of the background. Victor Matheson, with you once again. London is apparently empty in parts in the West End because all of the games taking part at the East End. Theatres are empty, hotel rooms are empty because prices are sky high. Was that something to be expected? Yeah,
this is entirely predictable, and this is what we've seen in event after event. Remember, a city like London is usually jam-packed full of tourists in the summer anyway. This is a great tourist destination. And for every Olympic athlete, Olympic tourist who comes in, every spectator or fan who comes to the city is not adding to the total amount of tourism that is there in London, but is instead displacing another tourist who would have been there instead. So really, from an economics point of view, the Olympics undoubtedly have a huge gross impact, but in terms of net impact, how much additional is it adding to the economy? Not very much.
Well, look, these are some figures I researched this afternoon. Barcelona and Berlin have seen their tourist numbers soar by 100% over the summer. The French, who lost the Olympics bid to Britain, quietly rubbing their hands, it suggested, for dodging the £10 billion games bill. We said it was more than that, actually. But seeing a 50% rise in tourism there. So what do you, Wolfgang, what sense do you get of why London feels it's still good to have the games?
Because the people are happy here. The Londoners are happy, the British people are happy. They have what economists call the feel-good factor. They are proud about their nations. They are proud about the athletes who win a lot of medals, much more medals than they would have won, let's say, if the Olympic Games would have taken place in France. They are happy to improve the image of Great Britain in the world. They showed in the opening ceremony that Great Britain is a fantastic country with a lot of history, with modern art, with modern music, etc. And in the end, and we should mention that because we mentioned the billions of investment. Today, Olympic Games are used as an infrastructure program, as a re-urbanizing program, and here in the east of London, it has really changed a lot. So formerly quite a poor region of London developed as if it otherwise would have taken, I think, some 50 years.
Yeah. For example, the athletes' Olympic Village, around about 5,000 housing units there, are going to be used for housing some of the less well-off in that part of East London. Victor Matheson, Wolfgang points out that there's a feel-good factor, that people are bubbling not only in London because of the Olympics, but perhaps because of the success of the Queen's Silver Jubilee there. But there is a hangover the morning after, the night before, when the party stops, and we've seen that in places such as Athens, to some extent in Sydney. Is it inevitable?
Well, first of all, let me say that I completely agree with Wolfgang that if a politician comes to me and sells me the games and says, you know, we want to bring the Olympic Games, say here to Boston, because it will be a great party for the city, it will be a great event that's just so much fun, and this is what we want to bring to our city, I wouldn't have any problems with that. As soon as a politician comes to me and says, we want to bring the games to the cities because it's going to make us a lot of money, that's where I think economists both like Wolfgang and myself would have some issues. When we talk about long-run legacy effects, those are obviously very difficult to measure. But a couple questions here. First of all, if there is so much money to be made and so much from these long-term investments in dilapidated areas of a city, one wonders why you need an Olympic Games to actually spur you to do these sort of things. If there's really such a high level of return from this sort of redevelopment, we would expect to see these things happening even without the presence of the games. And then you don't have to spend an extra $4 or $5 billion on superfluous Olympic facilities that you're not going to use again, as well as security and other costs here. So that's certainly something you're concerned about when talking about a legacy effect.
Tell me what went wrong in Athens. I mean, I know Greece has its own problems, but were they particular to the Olympics? Have we seen that reflected in other places? I mean, I know Atlanta as well didn't have a good time after the Games with everything they did have put in place.
Well, certainly Athens, more than maybe a lot of other cities, was really in a situation where extra borrowing put on top of Greece's already high debts is a lot to pay. If you're in a situation where you can borrow money for long-run investments at very low interest rates, then putting a few $billions towards a big party is not quite as big a deal. But when you're a country like Greece, who had finally, after many, many years, gotten its financial house together, then all of a sudden you kind of break the bank and run up your credit cards. That certainly is a problem there.
Yeah, talking of credit cards, the major sponsors, Visa being one of them, McDonald's, Coca-Cola, etc. Wolfgang, let me ask you about this. Investing in poorer countries that don't have the same background to fund supreme athletes such as yourself, are you seeing an increase in the willingness of these big sponsors, who we understand get quite a lot out of their profile in the Olympic Games? Are they putting more money, more effort into encouraging those poorer countries to do well?
If they are smart, and I think they are, they should do it, because that's the future markets are important. Markets like Great Britain, America and Germany are more or less saturated. But it's and for growth of your enterprise, you have to go into emerging market, and that definitely has been Asia in the last decades and South America. But in the future, it will be Africa. So if they are smart and they will use the sports, they will use the Olympics and the image of the Olympic to enter these markets.
They may want to use it to enter the markets. I suppose one of the things I was driving at was whether they were being munificent, that they were being altruistic, that they were not only taking their products to these countries, but they were investing in sport in these countries to try and help those less well off to succeed when it's very difficult for them financially.
Yeah, well, I don't know whether that's their obligation or their duty. The sport and the performance sport system of a country, in my view, is the duty and the obligation of the country itself. If I would live in Africa, I probably would not like, let's say, Coca-Cola to run my high-performance sporting system. They can give some money, they can help, but I want to run my politicians and my sport officials. They should run my system.
But if you haven't got the money, Victor Matheson, how do you run your own sports model and get your athletes to improve?
Well, that's obviously very difficult, and you can actually predict the number of medals a country is going to win very simply just by looking at a country's population and its per capita GDP. Large countries like the United States, lots of people who are very rich. Guess what? They're right there at the top of the medal tables. And a country like China, not yet rich like Europe and North America, but certainly climbing in wealth every year. Plus over 1 billion potential people to compete in the games, they're right there with the United States on top of the medal tables.
And national Olympic associations, in fact, national governments in many countries are paying their athletes now if they win gold. Let me give you some figures. You might be surprised at who's top of the list in terms of the money. The US, $25,000 if they get a gold. China, $31,500. France, $62,000. Now, this fascinated me, a country that's in really parlous financial state. Italy, paying $182,500 to any Italians who get gold medals, and they've got more than a handful at the moment. Wolfgang, is this the way forward, that a Games that we know is no longer amateur becomes so professional that the glory of winning Olympic gold is perhaps outshone by the money in your bank balance?
Well, I don't have problem with these amounts of money, even if you get $100,000 compared to the salary of, let's say, a banker or a teacher or anyone else with a, let's say, normal profession in European countries. Maybe it's twice the annual salary. And these athletes have devoted their lives and their money and their time and everything else for years, maybe a decade. So I think if you are an Olympic champion, there is no problem to receive such amounts of money. I think it's fair because so many parts profit from the Olympics. The organizers, the constructors, the architects, the TV station, everyone is getting a profit except most of the athletes. So let at least profit the winners of the Olympic Games.
Is it not also partly illustrative of the gap, the increasing gap between those who can afford to compete and pay well, and those who can't, who just struggle to even get a team to the Olympics.
Yeah, but what we see is that, and your examples point in that direction, that sometimes poorer countries give the highest amounts of premium. For example, Turkey is well known to give a long life pension and to give a house even to the gold medalists. And some poorer African nations donate a lot of money to Olympic gold medal winners. So, for example, my country, Germany, they don't give very much money for the gold medal winners. So I think these amounts of money for the gold medalists are not in a comparison to the national budgets of a big state, not that high that poorer countries can't afford it.
Victor Matheson, let's look forward. Rio 2016. Brazil is becoming a more wealthy country, but there are a lot of suggestions that it can ill afford at the moment to host the Olympics. It's going to have bigger problems perhaps than London. What difficulties does it have to surmount financially?
Well, among the big ones is developing countries generally have less in the way of existing infrastructure that allow them to host all of these big athletic events, as well as host the large crowds that come.
But it's going to look stupid.
If you're a city like Los Angeles, in 1984, they had such a well-developed sports infrastructure that they were able to host the Olympics essentially without building a single new facility. And of course, that was a games that was extremely profitable for the hosts and great for the city. But again, that's because they had everything in place they needed to host the games. To win a bid to host the Olympic Games nowadays is extremely expensive because the IOC has a huge number of cities all competing against one another, and they can choose among those cities the one that is going to put on the most spectacular and the most lavish games.
Wolfgang, the Games of '88, I'm not sure, apologies for this, whether in fact it was your first, but it was certainly your most successful. How much have you noticed the Games changing from a business model in the 24 years since then?
My first Olympic Games have been the Los Angeles Games in '84. And indeed, I think the Los Angeles Games were the turning point in the Olympic, let's say, marketing history. The Americans have been the first to be able to organize Olympic Games on a more or less private basis. And it heavily influenced what happened afterwards. By the way, when Los Angeles got the Olympic Games, they were the only applicant, because after the financial disaster of Montreal in '76, no one wanted to have the Games. After Los Angeles turned out so well, a high competition started. So I think the turning point was Los Angeles, and of course it's going to continue. I think the whole world has become richer. In my perception, the most important thing is that nowadays you don't have the East Bloc anymore and the Western Hemisphere. So also in the East European countries, you have free democracies, you have growing countries, you don't have that political confrontation anymore. So the whole games have become more colorful, more open, more fair. And I really appreciate that small countries like Kazakhstan, like North Korea, like Kenya, like Ethiopia win medals and win gold medals. So I think today the games are more open, more colorful. And of course,
thank you
more
very much
attractive
indeed.
For France as well.
Last word to Victor here. How have the games got to change to survive in the 21st century financially?
Well, this is a spectacular event that people around the world are willing to watch. The games are going to succeed, at least in large part, because we have a world where there's more and more communication, more and more media. Back in the old days when you could sell TV rights to the United States and Europe, that limited your financial ability to make money from the games. Now with the games open up to the entire world, yeah, that's where all the growth is going to be in terms of revenue. And the games are looking good for the IOC as far as you can see into the future. But again, it doesn't look so good for taxpayers in cities that are going to host these games.
Wherever you are, Thank you very much indeed. Thank you to both of you in London, gold medal winner Wolfgang Maennig and Victor Matheson in Boston. Thank you very much for joining us on this edition of Inside Story. Do send us your feedback. Email us your thoughts at insidestory@aljazeera.net. Inside Story at aljazeera.net. From me, David Foster, and the rest of the team, see you next time. Bye-bye.